Jake hated traveling at night, but tonight he had no choice. The late-night express was his only option to get home, and with work deadlines breathing down his neck, he boarded the train without a second thought. The platform was nearly empty, the cold wind biting against his skin as he stepped onto the train, his footsteps echoing in the hollow silence of the carriages. The train was old, its paint peeling, the seats worn, and the air thick with the musty scent of decades past. He walked down the dimly lit aisle, scanning for an empty seat. Most of the rows were unoccupied, but as he approached the middle of the carriage, his eyes landed on an available spot. Seat number 13. Jake hesitated. A chill ran down his spine. He wasn't superstitious, but something about the number gnawed at him. Shaking off his unease, he slid into the seat, tossing his bag onto the floor and leaning back with a tired sigh. The train jerked to life, slowly pulling away from the station and into the darkness beyond. Jake took out his phone, scrolling absent-mindedly through messages, but no signal reached this deep in the countryside. With a frustrated sigh, he stuffed the device into his pocket and stared out the window. The darkness outside seemed endless. Minutes passed. The train rocked gently, lulling him into a hazy drowsiness. That's when he heard it. Soft breathing coming from the seat next to him. Jake turned sharply. The seat was empty. He swallowed hard, telling himself it was just his imagination, but the sound persisted. Deep, ragged breaths, so close they brushed against his ear. He shifted uncomfortably and looked around. The other passengers were seated far away, silent, their heads down. No one else seemed to notice anything unusual. Then, the reflection. In the glass of the window, he saw it, a figure sitting right next to him. A man dressed in an old, tattered suit, his skin pale, his eyes sunken and hollow. He was grinning, his teeth sharp, his gaze fixed directly on Jake. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he whipped his head to the side. The seat was still empty. Cold sweat trickled down his back. He rubbed his eyes, convincing himself he was exhausted, that the flickering train lights were playing tricks on him. But when he looked back at the reflection, the figure was closer. His lips moved this time, whispering something Jake couldn't hear, his grin widening, stretching too far across his face. Jake bolted upright, gripping the edge of his seat. He had to move. He couldn't stay here. Gathering his things, he hurried toward the front of the train, passing rows of empty seats, his footsteps quick and unsteady. As he reached the door to the next carriage, a voice stopped him in his tracks. "You shouldn't have sat there." Jake spun around. The conductor stood behind him, his face stern but worried. "What? What do you mean?" Jake stammered. The conductor sighed, lowering his voice. "Seat number 13. People who sit there, they don't always make it to their destination." Jake's mouth went dry. "I saw something. Someone sitting next to me." The conductor's expression darkened. "Him," he whispered. "You saw him." Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, and the train lurched. The air turned freezing cold, and from behind him, down the aisle, a low chuckle echoed through the carriage. Jake turned back to look. The figure was standing there now, grinning that terrible grin. The train plunged into darkness. For what felt like eternity, there was nothing but the rhythmic clatter of the tracks and Jake's ragged breathing. Then the lights flickered back on. Seat number 13 was empty. Jake found himself seated again, gripping his armrests, his entire body trembling. The train pulled into the next station, and without a second thought, he bolted off, stumbling onto the platform, gasping for air. As the train pulled away, he dared to look back through the window. In seat number 13, the figure was still there, watching, grinning. Jake never took the night train again. But even now, sometimes, when he walks near the station, he swears he hears that voice whispering in the wind. "You shouldn't have sat there."
The ghost train of Ravenswood. The old Ravenswood train station had stood untouched for over 50 years, its dilapidated walls covered in moss and the rusted rails weaving their way into the thick forest. Most people didn't know about the station anymore, and those who did whispered of its dark past. It was said that on certain nights when the moon was high and the air still, the sound of a distant train could be heard rumbling through the trees. They called it the ghost train of Ravenswood. The story began decades ago in the 1920s when the Ravenswood station was the bustling center of a small, lively town. Trains came and went, carrying goods, visitors, and families who passed through on their way to far-off places. But all of that changed on one cold winter's evening. The train that would forever be linked to Ravenswood was called the Midnight Express. It was known for being a luxury passenger train, one of the fastest and most elegant. That fateful night, however, the train was returning from a mysterious location. Its passengers were mostly wealthy businessmen and well-to-do travelers. It was nearly midnight when the train arrived at the station. However, something was wrong. As the Midnight Express approached the station, it seemed to slow down unnaturally. The rhythmic chug of the engine was replaced by an eerie silence. The whistle that was supposed to pierce the night air never sounded. Instead, the train came to an almost unnatural stop on the tracks just outside the station. The conductor, a man named Robert Crane, stood up to investigate the sudden halt. The passengers, none of whom seemed to notice the oddness, began disembarking, excited to stretch their legs before continuing their journey. But there was no station master at Ravenswood, no lights shining, no welcoming station sounds. As Robert Crane stepped off the train to inspect the tracks, a dense fog began to roll in from the forest. The temperature dropped rapidly and the cold gnawed at the skin like ice. He could see nothing beyond a few feet, and as he looked back at the train, he felt an unsettling presence behind him. When he turned, he was met with nothing, only the faint echo of footsteps that didn't belong to him. His heart raced and he hurried back to the train. But when he boarded, something was terribly wrong. The entire passenger car was empty. His eyes darted from seat to seat, his breath growing heavier with each passing second. The light bulbs above flickered in and out of existence as if struggling to stay lit. That's when he heard it. A voice. A soft whisper at first, barely a murmur, but it grew louder as if speaking directly into his ear. The train never leaves, Robert. It never leaves. He spun around, but no one was there. The train's door had slammed shut with a loud bang, trapping him inside. Panic surged within him as he tried the emergency exits, but they were locked. A strange humming sound filled the air, reverberating through the metal walls, and a deep, foreboding creak echoed from the track below. With no other choice, Robert took a seat. The train began to move, but it wasn't moving forward. It was moving backward, creeping slowly through the thick fog. The lights flickered once more, casting a chilling glow on the worn-out, empty seats. Outside, the station was gone. The platform had disappeared into the mist, and the trees were black, their gnarled branches stretching toward the sky like skeletal hands. The train moved faster now, picking up speed, and suddenly Robert realized that the tracks were leading them through the forest, towards something far darker. The whispering voice returned, this time more urgent. "You shouldn't have come here, you shouldn't have stayed, now you'll never leave." The train rattled and groaned as if it were alive, trapped in some twisted nightmare from which it could never escape. Robert gripped the armrest, but the terror bubbling up inside him made it hard to breathe. Suddenly, the train lurched to an abrupt stop. The lights flickered and died. In the sudden pitch blackness, Robert heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing down the aisle toward him. He tried to scream, but no sound came from his throat. He was paralyzed, unable to move as the shadowy figure approached. The figure stopped just before him. Robert could feel its cold presence like the chill of death itself. He dared not look up, but he could hear the soft breathing of the figure, too close to be natural. A voice, cold and hollow, spoke. "You're not supposed to be here." Robert felt his heart thumping wildly, but before he could react, the figure moved away, vanishing into the shadows. The train jolted forward once more, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Robert could see, in the faint light of the emergency lanterns, the twisted faces of the other passengers staring at him. But they weren't alive. Their eyes were vacant, their faces frozen in horror, as though they had experienced this nightmare for years. The train picked up speed again. The trees outside began to distort, their trunks stretching and twisting into grotesque shapes. and the sky above churned with dark clouds, turning red and black. Robert's eyes grew wide with realization. The train was no longer on any real track. It was crossing dimensions or something worse. He was no longer on the train to anywhere. It was a prison. The ghostly passengers reached out toward him, their arms stretching unnaturally. They began to chant in unison, a mournful and guttural song, their words incomprehensible. It felt like the train was moving through a vast tunnel, a rift in time and space, and the end was nowhere in sight. "Welcome aboard," a voice echoed, both familiar and alien, as the shadows of the train seemed to grow and swallow the world. When the train finally came to a halt again, it wasn't in Ravenswood. It wasn't anywhere recognizable. Robert Crane had vanished. The Midnight Express continued to run, its haunting whistle now heard on certain nights by those who dared venture too close to the forgotten station. And those who dared to look deeper into the story would discover an even more chilling truth. The Midnight Express was never meant to be a train for the living.
The Midnight Train. Have you ever heard of the Midnight Train? Some say it's just an urban legend, a ghost story whispered among travelers at train stations late at night. But those who have seen it, they know the truth. The Midnight Train isn't just a story, it's a one-way ticket to a place you can never return from. Ethan had always been fascinated by such legends. As a self-proclaimed paranormal investigator, he made it his mission to seek out the strange and unexplained. And when he first heard about the Midnight Train, he knew he had to find it. The story went like this. If you waited alone at platform 13 at exactly midnight, a strange train would appear. Its arrival wasn't listed on any schedule, and no one knew where it came from or where it went. The legend warned that once you boarded, you could never get off unless the train let you. Ethan wasn't one to believe in superstitions. He thought it was just a spooky tale told to scare late-night travelers. But deep down, he hoped to find something real, something beyond logic. So one chilly autumn night, Ethan made his way to the train station, standing alone on platform 13. The station was eerily quiet, with only the distant hum of city traffic breaking the silence. A thick fog rolled in, wrapping around him like a cold embrace. Then at exactly 12 a.m., the sound of an approaching train pierced the night. Ethan's breath hitched as the train emerged from the darkness, its headlights barely cutting through the fog. It was an old locomotive, its metal exterior rusted and covered in grime. The windows were pitch black, reflecting nothing but his own anxious face. Despite the warning bells in his head, Ethan stepped aboard. Inside, the train was silent, too silent. Dim, flickering lights cast long shadows across the narrow aisle. The seats were filled with passengers, but something was off. They sat unnervingly still, their faces pale and expressionless, eyes fixed straight ahead. Ethan swallowed hard, whispering a cautious, "Hello?" No one responded, not even a twitch. He walked slowly down the aisle, his footsteps echoing through the empty train car. As he moved, he noticed something odd. Clutched in each passenger's hands was a small slip of paper, some yellowed with age, others fresh and crisp. He leaned closer to read one and felt his blood turn to ice. It was a departure date. Some dates were decades old, while others were frighteningly recent. A chill ran down his spine. He felt an overwhelming urge to check his own reflection in the window. And there it was, a ticket pressed against the glass, with his own name, Ethan Carter. Departure tonight. His pulse pounded in his ears. He tried to rip the paper away from the window, but it wouldn't budge. The train suddenly lurched forward and panic gripped him. He sprinted to the door, frantically tugging at the handle, but it wouldn't open. A voice, soft and chilling, whispered from behind him. "No one leaves the midnight train." Ethan spun around to see the conductor standing at the end of the aisle. He was tall and gaunt, his face sunken and hollow, with eyes that gleamed unnaturally in the dim light. His uniform was tattered and covered in dust, as if he had been working for centuries. Desperate, Ethan begged, "Please, let me off. I didn't mean to." The conductor tilted his head and smiled, revealing teeth far too sharp to be human. "Tickets have already been collected." With that, the train plunged into darkness, and Ethan's screams filled the air. The next morning, the station staff found his camera bag and phone lying abandoned on platform 13. They searched the security footage, but it showed nothing. No train, no Ethan, just the empty platform. And yet some nights travelers swear they see a shadowy figure standing by the tracks, clutching a small slip of paper, waiting for the next train to arrive. Will you be next?